God's Recipe, the natural alternative to Ritalin. Parents across America are receiving phone calls from their children's teachers, not to praise their progress in class, but to inform them there is a problem with Johnny. The problem? Johnny isn't staying up with the rest of the children. He's getting into fights at recess, and he's just not listening. The teacher has seen it hundreds of times. ADD, Attention Deficit Disorder. The most common form of treatment? Ritalin. Parents, trusting the advice of well-meaning professionals, are unknowingly starting their children on a cycle of chemical dependency. Is there an alternative? The good news is yes, and this tape will outline what has become known as God's Recipe, as well as letting you hear from some doctors on this very subject. God's Recipe is made up of very exciting natural health products. OPC grapeseed extract containing ginkgo biloba and a multi-enzyme product. This combination is making a huge difference in the lives of thousands of children and is a natural approach that works. Let's start this learning adventure with a well-known radio show broadcasted weekly, hosted by Dr. Joel Wallach.
Thank you, and welcome to the Wellness Hour. This is Dr. Joel Wallach, your host, a physician and a veterinarian. I can tell you, a lot of my patients say I treat them like dogs, but they seem to get better. We're going to talk about ADD, ADHD, hyperactivity, learning disabilities, and all kinds of related disorders. I used to be famous for this up in Portland, Oregon, where I practiced for 12 years. You used to see literally hundreds and hundreds, maybe as many as thousands of parents would bring their children to me who had these problems. And, of course, this was in the 70s and early 80s. People were just learning about Ritalin, and all the teachers would like to put these students on Ritalin. We're talking about 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-year-olds. They would want to put them on Ritalin. I think psychiatrists gave lectures to the teachers, so they were very aware of Ritalin. When a child was disruptive in the class, the first thing he would do is say to the parent, put the kid on Ritalin, and if the parent refused, the teachers would turn the parents over to the social services in Oregon, which were really hot to do something, and they would then take on the parents, and they'd say, look, if you don't turn the kid over to be put on Ritalin, the first thing that's going to happen is we're going to make the child a ward of the state, and the state will make sure that the kid gets Ritalin because it's good for the kid. And this is all based on a teacher's assessment of what was going on in the classroom. Well, what I got famous for was taking these kids and having them draw their favorite animal or plane or flower or house or whatever it might be prior to having breakfast in the morning, then having whatever usual breakfast they would have. It could be sugar frosted flakes, something like Pop-Tarts, syrup on their Egos, apple juice, grape juice, Sunny Delight, these kinds of things. Then go to school, and about an hour and a half later do their same drawing again, and then compare the two. And what we found out was that a 6-year-old who could draw a giraffe that looked obviously like a giraffe, after an hour and a half following a high-sugar breakfast, would draw a giraffe, would look much like a shmoo. For those of you who are old enough to remember what a shmoo looked like, it was a pillowcase with eyes on it. And so we would recognize that this kid was sensitive to sugar. And, of course, we've talked about this many times on this show. There are people who are sensitive to sugar in all forms, whether it's natural processed, corn syrup, honey, molasses, and people are sensitive to sugar just like they are to alcohol. And there are good alcoholics, people who, for instance, if they have a drink, they might go to sleep. This is on one extreme end. They go to sleep. There's people in the middle who drink alcohol and just kind of get giddy and loud and boisterous, and at the other end of the scale, they become violent. And the same thing is true with sugar. Some people, when they take in sugar, get sleepy and drowsy. Some people, when they take in sugar, get agitated and boisterous. And then some people, when they take in sugar, get violent. And ADD, ADHD is somewhere in between those two extremes, because these kids or adults even get disruptive, irritable. They can be involved in domestic violence. Certainly they're not going to learn how to read, write, and do math. They're going to experiment with cigarettes, alcohol, and drugs as they get older, trying to find something to satisfy their cravings to be successful at, because when you have ADD, ADHD, it's very difficult to be a positive performer. And so what we did was take these kids and young adults totally off of all sugar, natural and processed, supplement them with 3 trace minerals. This was lithium, chromium, and vanadium. And lo and behold, usually within 24 to 72 hours, there is a significant benefit. The parents and the teachers immediately recognize this. And then within weeks, the kid would go from the bottom of the class to the top of the class. It has nothing to do with intelligence. And we actually saved thousands of kids from being put on Ritalin. And today, welcome, Max James.
Thank you, sir. Good morning.
Good morning. And obviously, you've had a lot of personal experience. I was reading your materials. Why don't you share with our listeners how you got involved, a real estate agent, basically, and somebody with military background. How did you get involved with ADD?
Yes, I have a wonderful son, and when he reached the age of 6 years and headed off to the first grade, after about 2 weeks in school, we got that what turned out to be a perennial call from the school teacher saying, we have a major problem with your son. He's disrupting the class. He's 2 weeks behind academically. He's got quite a problem. He's the playground bully, and you need to come talk with him. We were absolutely stunned. Our son had no behavioral problems at home, was the nicest little guy you ever want to meet in your life. So we thought perhaps there was an error, that maybe it was the wrong child. In any event, fortunately, we had a very bright and progressive first-grade teacher who suggested that if that were the case, what she'd like to do is have the school psychologist test him. And they did so, and a couple of weeks later called us and said they believed that he had a learning disability. At that time, this was in the late 60s, they called it hyperkinesis or hyperkinetic behavior, and suggested that we go to Stanford University and have further psychological tests done. We did so, and they determined that indeed he was ADHD, and that was going to be incapable of getting a normal education if we didn't do something to render him some assistance. The intelligence exams that they gave him indicated that he had an extremely high IQ, but simply was not able to utilize it and produce the results. So we were given three choices, Dr. Wallach. They said, number one, you can institutionalize him. And,
this is a 6-year-old.
This is a 6-year-old.
Okay.
I said, well, that's interesting. I mean, what kind of institution you're talking about? And having seen the Jack Nicholls movie One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest,
exactly.
I had visions of horror. And they said, well, he'll be in with quite a variety of children with learning disabilities up to the medical level of moron. And that just didn't seem appropriate for my son, given that we had had no problems with his social behavior in the home setting, in the family setting. I said, what's my next choice? And they said, well, you could try nutrition. And I said, great, fantastic. What do we do? And their response was, you've got to remove all sugar, you've got to remove red food dye, no more peanuts, no more this, no more that, no more...
Wait a minute, you said this is in the 1960s?
Yes, late 60s, probably 68, 69.
Okay.
I said, well, you know, I think that we might be able to do that at home. It sounds like quite a challenge. But what do I do about his meals at school? And what do I do about vacations and camp and visits at friends' home and birthday parties? What is the third choice anyway? And they said, well, we highly recommend the third choice. It's the drug of choice. It's Ritalin. And Ritalin is safe. It's a mild drug, and they explained it, and so that was the recommendation, and that's what we did. The results were immediate and wonderful. Suddenly the handwriting, which had been virtually illegible, became not only legible but quite artistic. And I had thought that the handwriting problem was probably genetic. I couldn't write. My handwriting was terrible.
Mm-hmm.
So in any event, he suddenly started using three-syllable words, which his older sister had difficulty at that point understanding. And then the body made the adjustment, and a lot of that went away, and constant battles and with the appropriate dosage finally settled in, and we proceeded on a 6-year odyssey of my son on a drug that is more popularly called speed. The problem in my mind with Ritalin is that it works. He certainly was able to get an education. The problem with Ritalin also is the side effects in this case were, in my mind, devastating.
Parents who are just exhausted with a hyperkinetic child or one with ADD or ADHD, they get this relief from this drug Ritalin. Suddenly they can all go to sleep, and suddenly they can go on with their lives because the kid's under control and things seem to be going well and the education's going good, and they think they've solved the problem. This is why the medical profession and teachers can get parents kind of coerced into this because suddenly the major portions of their problems go away and they can say, whew, finally we get some relief here, and and we can go on with everybody's lives. Let me ask you something. Did they tell you to still, with a child on Ritalin, to take him off of sugar and supplement him with some trace minerals?
There's certainly no suggestion of trace minerals, no.
But they did say it would help to get him off of sugar.
Yes, they did. Yes, they did. The benefits of the Ritalin, of course, were that he became perfectly adjusted in the classroom. But the side effects, Dr. Wallach, are what have created my passion to see if I can find a better alternative.
Sure. Well, what were the side effects that you saw in your son?
For 6 years, my son was on Ritalin, and they required drug holiday, which is we took him off on the weekends and obviously during holidays in the summers. And when he came off the drug, there were withdrawals, the symptoms of drug withdrawal, as well as what's now popularly called Ritalin rebound, so that about late Sunday afternoon, behavioral problems really were abundant. Huge blue circles under the eyes from the abuse of this drug, lips that were constantly chapped and bleeding because he was so dehydrated from this drug that he was constantly licking the lips, and that created the problem. Depression, moodiness. And
these blue circles under the eyes, we call them allergic shiners.
Okay.
Yeah, allergic shiners, and invariably there's something that they're eating, either sugar in one form or another, or maybe even dairy can cause that on occasion. And it's one of the signals that the child's in trouble when you see these blue, purpley marks under the eyes that we call allergic shiners.
Well, it was clear to us that he was in trouble from a growth potential physically. At the age of 12, he weighed 50 pounds.
My goodness.
And when he finished the 6th grade at 50 pounds, we sent him back to the farm in Tennessee, back to my parents. And, of course, went off the Ritalin, and he got on those good natural foods back there and my dad's farm and garden, and then an environment that was free without the pressures of the schoolroom and the classroom. And Dr. Wallach, he had a 60% weight gain in 30 days. Went from 50 pounds to 80 pounds and never went back on Ritalin.
Isn't that amazing?
Absolutely amazing. He was able to go through the rest of his secondary education and, in fact, had an opportunity to redevelop and rebuild his self-esteem with a special program that at one time was provided by the University of Pacific here to help children with these problems. And he went on and got a college education and is a well-adjusted young adult today. But never back on Ritalin. I would hope that no one would ever have to go through that with their child.
Okay, so what have you been doing all these years since your son has gotten off of Ritalin? It says here that you're a tireless worker in helping people and going into the media and making sure that people know about this problem. Tell us some of your experiences.
Well, a little over a year ago, I was sitting in a lecture on nutrition, and a Dr. Chris Van Overen indicated that in his practice he dealt with a lot of children that were diagnosed as ADHD. And his experience was that many of them, not all, were unable to process or metabolize sugar. And that if you gave them a good multi-enzyme, the problem would often disappear. Well, I sat in this audience in total shock. I mean, I was stunned that I could have perhaps avoided putting my son through all of that pain and agony as well as the family by simply treating it with a nutritional supplement. And so I determined right then, that evening, that I was going to test it because, quite honestly, I didn't believe it. The route that we took in experimenting with nutritional supplements was to go with minerals, to go with a good, strong antioxidant combined with ginkgo biloba, and to go with a multi-enzyme and the elimination of as much sugar as possible out of these children's diets. The word just kind of spread, word of mouth, and the result has been, over a period of 10 or 12 months now, Dr. Wallach, that I receive phone calls every day, letters, people calling me, psychiatrists, medical doctors, neurologists, pediatricians, all wondering what we're doing. I'm not even sure I believe these statistics myself. I feel blessed by them. But I have not had one single case reported to me, not one, that a child has had to go back on Ritalin after going on to these nutritional supplements. What a blessing that is.
You can take comfort in knowing that I had the same results. Never had to have a child go back on Ritalin. the caveat here again, the thing that you have to have everybody agree on, that the whole family has to be aware, has to educate the child that there is a connection between sugar and their negative behavior. Kids don't like to be different, as you know. Kids don't like to be behind in class, and kids don't like to be a non-learner. And so once they really get down deep inside of them, this knowledge that sugar is a very negative thing for them, when you get them at a young age, and the whole family does the same thing, it's very, very easy to get them on the right road and stay on the right road. My own son, who was, I guess about 6 years old when we figured this out for him, we started looking at health food stores. You're able to get hot dogs, for instance, without corn syrup in it. You get pure beef, pure chicken, pure turkey, pure lamb hot dogs. When he got to be 9 years old, he'd go out with the Cub Scouts, and I used to make brownies out of the roasted carob and out of rice flour and so forth, and he could take his brownies that had a nice pecan half on the top of each brownie and his hot dogs and go and do his thing with the Cub Scouts and know that he couldn't eat anybody else's hot dogs. He couldn't trade. He couldn't eat their Twinkies, but he could eat their brownies. And because they were so special, I had to start making more of these things so that the whole Cub Scout troop wanted them. It was fascinating to see the change in the whole troop.
We have a problem in the United States with prescribed drugs and children. Right now, it's reported, and I can believe it, that ADHD is America's #1 childhood psychiatric disorder. And in some areas of the country, the percentage of children that are taking Ritalin has reached 7-8%. Over 2 million children on this. I am absolutely convinced by the hundreds and hundreds of people that I've talked to that it is not necessary.
Oh, absolutely. And, of course, the reason, Max, is that per person in America, now this does not exclude children. It doesn't say per adult, so it says per person. There's 148 pounds of sugar per year consumed per person. Now, there's some poor kid out there eating 300 pounds because I don't eat any.
Right.
And my son doesn't eat any. I'm assuming yours doesn't. So there's 6 people out there who are eating 300 pounds of sugar per person. And it's pretty scary. And another fact, which is even scarier to me, according to experts, juvenile and childhood experts, 1/3 of American children are going to be in a juvenile court this year, 1996, because of behavioral problems, because of some kind of criminal behavior, whether it's burglarizing neighborhood houses or assault or murder or manslaughter, these kinds of things, destructive behavior. And you can attribute most of this really to this 148 pounds of sugar per kid and the fact that our foods are totally deficient in minerals, and that if you don't supplement these kids with lithium, chromium, and vanadium, zinc, sulfur, things like copper, magnesium, manganese, and so forth, they get all kinds of physical problems as well as mental ones. And I have to ask you, have you had any rebellion from parents who say, well, gosh, this is so expensive, our insurance will pay for the Ritalin, and we have to pay for the vitamins and minerals?
I really have not. I've found that parents really are anti-drug for children. They don't want the kids on drugs, and you're exactly right. These children do not want to take Ritalin. In fact, I am working with one school nurse whose job it is every day to stand at the head of this queue of children all lined up to take their meds, as they're called. And they have to be supervised, of course, because it's controlled substance. She says now that she actually has to put her fingers into their mouth to ensure that they are, in fact, taking Ritalin because they don't want the drug.
I hope she's washing her fingers between each child.
Well,
okay,
sure
Max, hang on. This is Dr. Joel Wallach, your host of the Wellness Hour, and we're going to be right back after this message.
Jerry, you're on live with Dr. Joe Wallach and Max James. Your question, please, Jerry.
I'm a judo coach, and I have several students that are obviously suffering from ADD. What kind of information can you give me on that?
As you know, Dr. Wallach, an awful lot of these children that are ADHD become great athletes because of the frustration and energy that builds up inside them, the anger of having to deal with the problem on a daily basis. It certainly was the case with my son, and so we find a lot of ADHD children in judo classes, and they also become great entertainers, again, because of this energy. But 1 out of every 3 is going to drop out of school, and if they carry this into adulthood, the national statistics are that 1 out of every 10 will attempt suicide. So my recommendation is a couple of ounces of minerals each day for these children. We believe that the antioxidant is very important. They help clean up the free radical damage that's going on inside their little brains, and we combine that with ginkgo biloba. And then we think that the multi-enzymes to help them metabolize that sugar that they're going to get, we just can't seem to eliminate enough of it, is very important.
Okay, thank you. Does that help you out, Jerry?
Yeah, that helps me quite a bit, and I'm going to try it out with a couple of the students that I have in mind, and I will definitely let you know how it went.
Yeah, great. And of course, you want to have the parents go through those boxes of all the items that have sugar in it, or give them 10 cents for every different can, box, bottle, or bag that has sugar in it. You know, some incentive, and you'll be amazed. It'll be a lot of fun.
Right. Great. Appreciate it.
Okay, Jerry.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Max, if you had to have one recommendation for parents when they discover, usually parents discover on their own that there's a problem, or a teacher tells them. Personally, I like to keep them away from counselors and shrinks because they invariably direct them and convince the parent it's the right thing to do to get them on Ritalin. And I feel if the parents are really interested in the child, I give them the advice without suggesting that they go to a counselor or a shrink. How about yourself?
A major concern here over this child's self-esteem. It's a problem that can be dealt with, and it's going to require a great deal of patience and a tremendous amount of love for that child, but that I believe that the problem can be overcome without drugs, and that the problem can be overcome with nutrition. And number one, you must reduce the amount of sugar. Number two, because you cannot reduce all the sugar, you've got to do something about the negative impact of the sugar. And so we start just with that recommendation. Diet, diet, diet.
And as you point out, it's a lifelong process, and some get it and some don't. It's really a sad thing. And again, I attribute to the kids who don't get it is because the family is not willing to give up sugar in their own lives and give the support that's totally necessary for the kid and do the education that's necessary to have the child make the association between sugar and the negative behavior.
We've also had great experience, by the way, in going to the doctors. Not being a medical practitioner myself, I'm very careful, of course, when children are on prescribed drugs, and I suggest to the parents that they go to their doctor and tell the doctor what they want to do. Tell the doctor that they want to try an alternative. And Dr. Wallach, I simply have to say this, that there have been no long-term studies on the negative effects of Ritalin or Xylard or some of the others that are used. And it seems to me that there's something wrong with a picture that says we put adults in jail for possessing this drug, and yet we're forcing our children to take it on a daily basis. There weren't any pharmacies in the Garden of Eden, and I've just got to believe that this can be handled using natural supplementation.
You're absolutely right, and it's a matter of giving up that sugar, 148 pounds of sugar per kid per year, and supplementing them properly. And I've just seen such wonderful results with pills. It used to take me somewhere around anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks to see some real progress, because you can't absorb the elemental forms of minerals very well. Even children only would get 8 to 12%. But with minerals, I've had so many parents come back to me and say, hey, in 72 hours, this kid is just a different child. The teacher asked if this was the good twin. And I'm sure you've seen the same thing.
I have indeed. My brother is a doctor back in Memphis, Tennessee, and his children suffer from this malady, and they have seen results overnight. Often I hear by the next morning a perceptible change in behavior. It's truly a blessing, Dr. Wallach.
So people have everything to gain and nothing to lose by doing this.
Amen.
Absolutely. And we just want to thank you a lot, Max, for being with us.
Well, thank you for sharing this time with me.
Yes, and appreciate all your experience and hope that this works.
Max James has taken this mission upon himself to educate as many parents as he can. Please turn to Side B to hear more about God's recipe. During a recent phone session, parents of ADD children met with Dr. Chris Van Overen and Max James.
Bobby, would you mind leading us off?
Oh, not a bit.
Oh, fantastic.
I am so excited to be able to share the wonderful things that have happened to my daughter. She started showing signs of ADD when she was in first grade. And in second grade, she started out above level in reading and ended up with below level at the end of the year. There were a couple of other children in her classroom that also had the same problem as Katie. And between all of them mixed together, it was a pretty hectic classroom for the poor teacher. And by the end of the year, she was doing cartwheels in the back room and the whole 9 yards and not really learning anything. And she was also having social problems. She was having these fits of rage. She couldn't hold friends because of the rage that she was showing, and the rage was coming out at the family and on her sister. And she was just, poor thing, was in trouble all of the time. You'd ask her to do a specific task and go and check on her in about 10 or 15 minutes, and the poor little thing was in a trance. I mean, it was like she was staring off into space, and it's like, honey, why haven't you done what we asked you to do? You know, you've been in here for 15 minutes. No, Mom, I just walked in the room. And she was very honest. You know, you can tell when kids are fibbing, and she was very, very honest with the fact that she felt that she had just walked into the room. So this was long before I found these wonderful products, the multi-enzymes and such. We started working with a naturopath, and she did help us. She said that, you know, a lot of times it's with food allergies that these things occur. And so we did change her diet and so on and so forth, but when we started on the minerals and the enzymes and the proanthocyanidin product that has the ginkgo biloba for the brain, etc., my daughter just came up 100% better than just with changing her diet. And in 2 weeks, her teacher called me at home during the day. It scared me because I thought something had happened. And she said, Mrs. McEwen, I would like to know what it is that you're doing different with Katie. And I said, well, in what regard? You know, after having so many bad phone calls, you know, with a child with ADD, you kind of don't want to volunteer too much. Oh, gee, what have we done now? She was wonderful. She says, I don't know what you're doing with her and for her, but whatever it is, please don't stop. She says, please do more. She said, Katie is focusing in the classroom, and she is her attitude towards the other children is changing, and she's calming down, and she's actually grasping onto concepts now. And I said, well, gosh, it's only been a couple of weeks since we started her on these new products, these natural healthcare products. And she said, wow, I don't care what it is that you've done. I am just so excited. She said, I'm really beginning to see what a wonderful child Katie is. And you told me that at the beginning of the year, that she was really a wonderful child, but because of these problems and stuff with her ADD, it's hard to get to know the real Katie like you have the chance to at home. And she says, I'm just so excited that I've had the chance to get to know the real Katie underneath the problem. She said, this is just wonderful. And the year has continued to progress, and she is just doing absolutely wonderful. She has several friends now. She's become quite popular in school, and she's doing much better on her homework, and we're still working with some of the backlashes of the ADD, but Katie is definitely a success story, and we just started her on these products, and so we haven't had her on them for an extreme amount of time before, you know, we're very pleased, thinking that she's just about cured from the ADD symptoms.
Oh, that's a fantastic story. Fantastic. Jackie, why don't you do the same? Just tell us what's happened in your special family with ADHD and nutritional supplements.
Okay. I have a son who is 14 right now, and he has had ADD since he was teeny. He was one of those kids that was hyperactive and couldn't sit still and loved to experiment and was always breaking everything in the house. We had trouble with the frustration mainly. Everything he tried to do was so hard for him, and he would get terribly frustrated. When he was learning to read, he would read a word fine one day, and he wouldn't remember it the next. He couldn't remember the multiplication tables. When he was spelling, he'd drill and drill and drill, and then he wouldn't remember it the next day, and it made him so frustrated. And so usually with his schooling, he would do 10 or 15 minutes and get so frustrated, he would go out and jump on the trampoline. He's very good at that. And also another thing he used to do is when he got really frustrated, he'd kind of almost roll up in a ball and say, I'm so dumb, I'm so dumb. I can't. How come I'm not like anybody else? And it was driving me crazy, and I felt like I needed to put him on some kind of drugs just because his life seemed so miserable, and we really didn't want to go to Ritalin. And so we kind of worked with him until we found these products, and it was amazing. We gave him the first dose at night, and the next morning, when we sat down we do scripture reading first, and when we sat down to do our scripture reading, he took his turn and he read fluently, not one word at a time, not sort of sounding them out and looking at them as if he had never seen them before. He read fluently, just as fluently as could be. And we were just shocked because he'd only had 2 doses, night and morning. And then he sat down at the computer and typed a story. And the story ended up being, he typed that day for like 6 or 7 hours with a little while off for lunch, straight through. When he came across a word he couldn't spell, he'd always just fly into a rage. This time, if he came across a word he didn't know, he'd either spell it the best he could and then use the spell checker, or he'd ask somebody and go right on. No rage, no frustration. And his story is absolutely amazing. He sent it into the contest right now. He won first place in the local contest, and it's in the statewide contest right now. It's an amazing story. He did a fantastic job, and I can always tell if he has remembered to take it or not, because if he hasn't taken it, then little things bother him, like he can't find his shoes, and he just gets so frustrated and so angry. And all you need to say is, hey, did you take your stuff? Did you take your pills? Nope. It's just really easy to tell you. It's made a huge difference in his life.
Oh, what a fantastic story. That's great story. Oh, thanks, Jackie. I really appreciate you sharing that with us.
That's great.
Dr. Chris, any particular thing you'd want to add into that's classic or that you've observed?
Well, I'm not exactly sure why sugar is the main problem. There are a few concepts that we're fairly sure of, and that is that refined sugar is the main culprit because it gets metabolized in the digestive system much quicker, basically raises havoc with the rest of the metabolism of the sugar, and it causes a very high influx of insulin to regulate this immense absorption rate of the refined sugars. That's basically the mechanism involved there, is that primarily we're just taking in the incorrect form of sugar, which we were never intended to receive that way. We were intended to receive sugar in a natural form, like from fruit or vegetables. And so now what's happened is through that violation, the digestive system is imbalanced, you might say. Its ability to tolerate these sugars has decreased, and then, of course, that leads into dysfunction. Where the enzymes come in is twofold. One is to try to help the body recover from this dysfunction by providing enzymatic action with the sugar that is inevitably going to be a part of our diet, and thus helping to regulate the metabolism better. That's the primary function of how that does that. The second deal is what it also does is it sort of gives the body an opportunity then to heal up certain aspects of the digestibility of these sugars by providing its own enzymes. When you have a dysfunctional system, it takes time for the body to heal, and getting this extra help from the enzymes gives you this extra time and ability for the body to heal it up. So it's a twofold situation, and it's in conjunction with a person having to reduce the amount of these refined sugars in their diet and then supplementing in the enzymes to help the body recover and bring it back into balance, and also help regulate normal metabolic process of the sugar.
Fantastic, Chris. Thanks. You related that to the cofactors.
Because it is required to be metabolized so much, it depletes the body of the cofactors and coenzymes, or coenzymes are vitamins and cofactors are minerals. So that's why the minerals fit into this program, is that you end up depleting or utilizing the minerals available in the body just to try to maintain as long as it can while the person is taking in these processed sugars or violating natural digestive processes. So if you're depleting your vitamins and your minerals and your enzymes, it's somewhere along the lines, it's just going to raise havoc and something's going to give. And in this case, it's ADD. So the remedy, nutritionally, would be to supplement back in the vitamins and the minerals, or the enzyme cofactors and coenzymes, along with the food enzymes to bring the body back into balance.
Dr. Chris, what about the antioxidants and what benefit we may be receiving by the people that are ADD?
Well, the antioxidants, of course, anytime that you're going to have tissue dysfunction, you're going to have inflammatory processes going on, more than likely. And, of course, the antioxidants do have an effect on inflammation in attempting to reduce it, thereby also trying to bring back into balance normal function. Things like ginkgo have elements of them that get into the brain to help in the tissue in that particular organ. So there's a relationship there, I think, between utilizing antioxidants and also getting into specific regions of the body or specific organs, for example, the brain with ginkgo. And this helps then to bring back into balance the normal function of specific tissues or organs.
Okay, super. I've got one last one for you, Chris.
Okay.
Children are getting the attention here for ADHD. What about taking this malady into adulthood? What's the story there? Is it curable? Do we just learn to deal with it? What's the situation?
The basic premise is the body's a self-healing organism, and in order for it to continue to maintain its natural processes of self-healing, it needs to be fed. And if we continue to feed it appropriately, it has its best opportunity then to maintain proper health. That transcends all age. It doesn't matter how old you are. I think that the answer is basically the same thing.
Right. Fantastic, Chris. Thanks very much. Sure appreciate your time.
Okay, thank you very much.
We'll see you soon.
Okay, bye-bye.
Well, let's see. Mike Hort,
Hi, Max.
how about telling us what's going on in your family?
Travis is a 5-year-old young man, great personality. We have managed to keep him away from the thought of having to take Ritalin by natural means. First, we took sugar out of his life. At about 3 years old, Travis had some challenges, and whenever he had sugar, he became a totally different person. Everybody out there listening, if you're listening to this because you have a challenge, you already know all the stories. You know what happens. You know what happens in school. You know what happens at home. You know what happens to the character of the persons we're talking about. It's not just Travis. This is happening to children all over America. So with sugar, we controlled it a lot. We changed his life a lot. Only half as much as his life changed when we were able to give him minerals, enzymes, and OPCs. The group together really made some major changes. And I want to say, when we first started giving him the products, we half-heartedly gave him the products, and we've seen minimal change. It wasn't until we got really regiment about giving him these products all day, every day. And what I mean by that is by giving Travis these products 3 times a day, or if it took 4 times a day. You could tell when there's a mood swing and there's a change that started to come on. We made sure that he had an enzyme whenever he ate anything. If it was a piece of toast, he had an enzyme. He had minerals at least twice a day and OPCs at least twice a day. What a difference. He's a little gentleman. All of the things that we were experiencing that could have led us to other means of, what a lot of other kids are having to take. I know there's some other programs they're trying to get all kinds of other types of programs going. But we combated it naturally, not even knowing that we had the major problem. So we're like so many others out there. We think that our child is just maybe a little more excited, a little more ornery than others, and that's normal. We think it's normal because there are so many other children out there that we can compare him to. So we think that's normal, and what we have to learn is it's not normal, it's common. There's a lot of other people out there, a lot of other children or even adults that we can compare it to that makes it common, but not normal. So to keep that in mind, there's a problem that needs to be addressed, and there are ways to address it naturally. It's really wonderful.
Well, that's a fantastic story. Zoanne.
Yes.
we understand that you've got a wonderful story to share with us about nutrition in your family and ADHD.
We started about 4.5 months ago, and this has been the greatest 4.5 months we've ever had, ever. My son is 6.5 years old. In fact, I had talked to Jackie Ruland about natural things to help for the ADD, and this is what she told me about. And at that point, my son, he's in first grade, the principal was bringing him to my work to get him out of the school. He was running away from school. He was talking back to the teachers. He was a severe discipline problem, almost to the point of being kicked out of school in first grade. That was the main thing. We had just taken the written test through the school for ADD. The teacher made it out that he was an extreme discipline problem and that we had this meeting. They said I must not discipline him enough, I must not be structured enough with him, all these things that were my fault, that were his fault. And right after that meeting was when I started the pills. And I started with one a day, and I didn't see much difference for about a week. And so Jackie told me to try 2. And so I tried 2 pills a day over the weekend, and then that Monday, from that time period on, we have had perfect behavior all the way through. He won a little pin from the principal for his outstanding work. He got a trip to Sam's Town, all paid for by the principal, because he has done so fantastically. They're on a green card, yellow card, red card system, green card being the best. He was getting 2 to 3 red cards and a yellow card every week, which was bad. And he's gotten 1 red card in 4.5 months. His teacher says that she wishes that she could get this stuff for every kid in her class. Just everybody comes into my work. Every day I hear it. I hear feedback of how great he's doing. What is he doing? What are we doing? It's fantastic.
Oh, that's a fantastic story. I've learned a lot tonight, and I very much appreciate your being willing to share all of this. I think one of the things that I'd like to kind of end with here is Zoanne said, thank God. And it seems to me that we have properly titled what we're doing, and the success of this formulation, this combination of natural nutritional supplements with the 8, 10, 15 calls I get a day and the hundreds and hundreds of parents and children now that are benefiting from this, we really can, I think, in good consciousness, call it God's recipe. And what most of us are doing is 2 ounces of these minerals spread during the day, maybe first thing in the morning and then sometime mid to late afternoon. 40 milligrams of this proanthocyanidin, preferably one that comes from grapeseed extract, in combination with ginkgo biloba. And we think that you should take those roughly at the same time that you take the mineral supplementation. And then lastly, because there is no question that sugar is a major culprit in ADHD and ADD, we need to eliminate sugar as much as possible from all of our diets, but particularly from the diets of those that are very sensitive and impacted negatively by sugar. And in order to help ease the problem of the sugar that we are unable to eliminate, these multi-enzyme capsules are phenomenal because, as Dr. Chris has told us tonight, they assist mightily in metabolizing the sugar and getting that whole digestive process and the reaction of digesting sugar under control so that we don't get the mood swings and the metabolic swings. So we call that God's recipe. Hopefully with the information that you have been kind enough to share with us tonight, the recipe will spread and the resultant blessing will occur to as many people as possible. So I would just say again, thank you.
To discover how you can start your children on God's recipe, contact the person who thought enough to give you this tape. All proceeds from this tape are donated to ADD research.
Information and statements regarding dietary supplements discussed have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration and are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.